Hey y'all, everybody's favorite bumpkin here. Guess what? This time the microphone works. So, I'd like to give a big warm welcome to all of our longtime viewers and our new people here. Welcome to the 1-year anniversary of the Joe the Mountain Jedi YouTube channel and Ramblin' Park here in the Jedi Temple, okay? Think about it, y'all. A year ago today, we were sitting here looking at some doofy bumpkin bumbling around, you know, with some shaky ass cell phone footage and everything in his garage while we were in the middle of a minor flood from Hurricane Debbie. Thankfully, we haven't had any weather like that at this point in time this year, so here's hoping that trend continues, okay? A year, wow, this is awesome. You know, this is kind of a surreal thing to be putting out there on the tubes right now, but if you'd asked me a year ago if we would be sitting down and having this conversation, I'd be like, no way, no how. But here we are, because as of the last time I looked, there's 5,299 of you folks out there that actually enjoy what we do here, or you're interested enough in what we do here to where y'all subscribe. And that is awesome. That's a huge number for me, because I got to thinking about it earlier today. My hometown in Van Buren, Arkansas, I can remember when I was a wee little runtlet, the sign at the city limits of Van Buren when you were coming in from Highway 64, it said Van Buren, population 6,112. So anyway, Shovelhead shit, cool, motor, check, done. But we got something else. Now we have this very sparkly and slightly odd amalgamation of swing set pipe and playground equipment that is the basis for our Harley-Davidson Shovelhead build, okay? Now, right now, all this is just a kind of a Rube Goldberg assemblage of some steel pipe, a couple of chrome baubles here and there, and, you know, a little bit of powder coat that got cooked on there, which I might add, the powder coater did an excellent job on this frame. I mean, it's like they powder coated a freaking marble. This thing is beautiful. And for the amount of money this guy charged for doing this stuff, it's a steal. I don't mind paying, and I don't mind driving for good product. And the thing is, this is damn good product. So there's a reason that we call this a frame. It's a framework. It's the backbone. It's the basis for what will in the coming weeks become a damn cool, very unique motorcycle. An assemblage and contraption of various moving parts and somewhat outdated and outmoded electrical and mechanical and hydraulic systems that all come together into forming a motorized conveyance. So yeah, cool. Please excuse my slightly scattered and maybe moderately overly caffeinated exuberance here at the progress that we're making on yay old Shovelhead. Big deal. Woo. We got a frame sitting on the lift. Well, you know what? That's a starting point, because now I got something that I can start hanging all of these parts that I've got laying here in the garage floor in cardboard boxes and this and that and this motor and this transmission and primary and all that stuff. It's adult Legos. Not those kind of Legos, because we don't talk about those Legos here on this channel. You guys out there, you know what I'm talking about. You've probably seen it in the background. Anyway, moving on. Now, I know last week's video that didn't happen, honestly, I was kind of mad about that, because there was a lot of really good information that I had in that video that unfortunately we lost, because my audio just went, my microphones, they went, and yeah, and I had no idea, because everything that I saw, it was recording all my audio just fine. But by the time I got down to putting together a video for you fine folk, the audio on it was so faint and it was so garbled that by the time I boosted it up to where you could even try to hear it, you couldn't make heads or tails of it. And that made me mad, because there was a lot of good info in there. So we're going to kind of touch back on the high points on that just a little bit, all right? Now, the big thing that I lost on that I wanted to share with y'all was putting the charging system on the motor. That way it's assembled on the motor, you know, motor's ready to go back in the frame. And also, there was a couple of things that I was going over on how the charging system works for some of our viewers here that may not be aware of how the black magic works and turns rotary motion into electrons. So let's follow up with that, shall we? Okay, guys, y'all know me, all right? I'm not an artist, and I draw stick figures, and they look like they've got some kind of a syndrome. So please bear with me and understand. For a few minutes, I'm going to be behind the camera. That way I can show you what's going on here that I sketched out on the whiteboard here on the shop door. Yay, talking hands time. Okay, gang. This is the very awkwardly and poorly drawn, I might add, rendition of how a single-phase charging system in your average Harley-Davidson works. Now, the majority of this is applicable to three-phase charging systems as well. They work in a similar fashion, except this is a one-phase system that I'm going to illustrate here for you. And it's pretty simple. You have your stator here, which is basically just a row of copper windings around individual poles, and those windings are all connected in series. As you can see by the blue lines I've got that's connecting the black blocks here, which represents our coils in our stator. Now, all of these are connected in series, so it goes from here to here to here to here to here to here to here, taking the big, long, roundabout way all the way around the stator. And it ends up coming out as two wires, here and here. Now, this is one thing where things get a little bit weird on Harley. And let me grab something here I can use as a visual aid. Be right back. Okay, this is our original stator out of our Shovelhead. It's black, it's grubby, it's crusty, ew. This is one of the rare ones that actually has a date code on it, and it shows when it was manufactured. If you can see right there by my thumb, maybe you can, maybe you can't, manufactured in October of 1990. So we know this thing got replaced at least once before. But any way you slice it, that was still 35 years ago. So that's why we're putting a new charging system in this bike when we're doing the rebuild on it. Now, coincidentally, whenever they put the new stator in there, they also replaced the rotor. Now, this may have been because of a somewhat typical failure of Harley rotors at the time. If you notice, we have a big stainless steel sleeve that covers the individual magnets in this rotor shell. This is the replacement rotor that I'd found inside this bike whenever I tore it down. Now, obviously, we're not using this because we don't know anything about its lineage or its history. But this is the same type of rotor that I reinstalled in the bike whenever I put all this stuff together the other day before I found out that my microphones had died. The big thing is, on the majority of your aftermarket rotors, they're going to have this stainless steel band in here that both covers and locates the magnets inside this rotor shell. Let's refer to our diagram and I'll show you why. If you look on our diagram here, you'll notice these blocks in the rotor, which I've so terribly drawn out here, these represent the magnets inside that rotor shell. And if you notice, they're oriented north, south, north, south, north, south, because magnets have a polarity to them. They have a north and a south pole. Now, this is where the magic happens. As the rotor is spinning around the stator, these coils are having magnetism placed against them in one direction and then in the opposite direction. What that does is that promotes the movement of electrons. That travels throughout the stator and it gets pushed out of the stator as an AC voltage because it's alternating current at that point. It's toggling back and forth from north-south, north-south, north-south on the magnetic field of the rotor surrounding the stator coils. So it's coming out of your stator as AC voltage. Now, we all know that motorcycles run on DC voltage, DC volt battery, 12 volt battery. It's common knowledge. Some of y'all may have 6 volt, but for the most part, it's 12 volt these days. Right here, this is where our stator here connects to our voltage regulator, which is another horribly drawn product. The regulator is somewhat of a misleading term. The voltage regulator is actually a combination unit. It is a regulator rectifier. What it's doing, it's converting this AC voltage to DC voltage. It basically acts as a one-way gate for electricity. That way, all the electricity is flowing in one direction instead of back and forth and back and forth, because that doesn't work for our purposes on a street-driven motorcycle. But at the same time, since it's rectifying that voltage from AC to DC, it also regulates it down to where we have a usable voltage output that will charge our battery and maintain our ignition and lighting systems, but it will not overcharge our battery. So the excess electricity that is generated by the rectifier after it goes through the regulator it gets shunted to ground as basically a controlled short circuit. That's why regulators get warm when they're running, because that heat is generated from the excess voltage being shunted to that ground. Now, testing these systems. Real simple, especially on a single phase. You take your meter, unplug your regulator from your stator connector right here, and then you take your voltage meter, set it to continuity, probe each side of that circuit on the connector, and then the other pin of your meter, put that to chassis ground somewhere, just somewhere metal on the motor. You don't want to see any continuity there whatsoever. If you don't, cool, let's move on to the next step. You set your meter to resistance, and we're going to measure the resistance on either side of this connector here, because we're measuring the total resistance of all these windings in the stator combined on the entire circuit. Now, typical rule of thumb, you don't want to see more than roughly 1.5 ohms to 2 ohms at the most, but you don't want to see 0.1 ohm or 0.2 ohm, something like that, because that's going to tell you that there is a short in these windings somewhere, and a lot of this is not coming into play, and it's taking a detour and making a U-turn. So we don't have continuity from either of our stator leads to the engine case ground, and we've got good resistance here across our stator. So now what do we check? Well, at this point, we set our meter to AC voltage, and we're going to start the bike, and we're going to probe across these two leads here on the stator side of the connector. Remember, we're making AC voltage here, so that's what we need to measure for. That's what we got to set our meter to. Now, typically at idle, you'll see 15 to 20 volts AC current generated by the stator at an idle speed, because this is going to be somewhat linear. As the engine RPM goes up, the output from this stator is going to go up. At, say, 2,500 RPM or so, a fast idle, you should see at least 60 volts AC, if not a little bit more than that. If you're not seeing at least 50 volts AC at, say, 2,500 RPM, that tells you right there you got a problem. And you need to recheck your resistance on your stator here, and also recheck your continuity to ground, because sometimes you can have an intermittent short that will kind of sort of bleed off a little bit of electricity that the stator's putting out, but not kill it entirely. So you got to dig a little deeper and do your due diligence. Okay, moving on from the stator. So our stator tests good, it ohms good, we don't have continuity to ground, and we're putting out good AC voltage out to the regulator. Yes, there are bench tests that you can do on a voltage regulator. Some of them are overtly complex, and some of them can be very misleading. So real world, if your stator checks out and everything is in spec, and you know it's in spec, and even after the motor is warm, your output voltage values don't change significantly, nor do your resistance voltage values change significantly, look at your voltage regulator. Because if it's not putting out at least 13.5 volts DC out of the regulator to the battery at our 2,500 RPM, elevated idle speed, you got a problem here, Bubba. Look real hard at that little guy. Like I said, y'all, not the best diagram in the world, but then again, let me put it to you like this. My mother oil paints, she acrylic paints, she used to paint china plates, and she used to do ceramics and various other arts and crafts, and my mom is fantastic at contouring and shading and blending color and mixing color and this and that and all the artsy-fartsy crap and everything. My daughter is too. My daughter is an extremely talented artist. I, on the other hand, like I said, I draw stick figures. They look like they have some kind of a syndrome. So obviously that DNA just kind of hops around at random and lands wherever it wants to, but it did not land on me. Now that I got the garage door up and we've got our diagram put away, that way I can a little bit of airflow come through the shop here. Let me get geared up to where I can show you guys where we start out with on the basis of assembling our frame. That way we can start throwing parts in there and we can actually make a motorcycle. Okay, now you guys may remember during the disassembly portion of our video on yay old Shovelhead here, we ground those gnarly looking foot peg mounts off of the swing arm because they were just ew, gross. Yeah, not very attractive. So anyways, after all that, that's when I found out that that swing arm actually had a little bit of twist to it. It was actually bent just a little bit from when the bike had been wrecked in a previous life. Getting around that, what am I to do here? Do I spend 2, 3, 4, 5 hours trying to put a swing arm in a press and pry it and lever it and measure it and get everything tweaked back out? Well, you know what? If I was totally desperate, yeah, I'd have done it because the tweaking, it wasn't that bad. But I scored a deal on this little beauty right here from Ted's V-Twin, and I'm never one of these people that will sit there and preach, chrome gets you home, brother. But you know what? The price was right. It was new out of the box, and all I got to do is put bearings in it, and we can put this thing back into the frame. Speaking of putting bearings in it, let me run into the house and grab some stuff out of the freezer real quick. I'll be right back. Ain't a popsicle, but you know what? Ain't the first time I've put bike parts in the freezer neither. I never been caught enough. She don't know about the transmission, y'all. So anyway, the reason I put these bearing races in the freezer, if you put them in there, let them chill down overnight, they will actually draw up just a tiny, tiny bit. You know, it's physics and shit, but it makes them easier to drive the bearing races into your swing arm or frame or wheels or wherever you're poking a bearing into. So, if y'all will excuse me, I got to act fast before these things fall out. Now, just getting them started in, if you need to, it's okay to tap them in very gently, just starting them in, but make sure you use a brass hammer. You don't want something that's going to tear up your bearing. This thing is being reluctant. And no, we don't have any lip on there, but we probably do have some chrome buildup inside the pivot portion of this swing arm, and that's probably giving us a little bit of ass pain right now. Alright, now we got our bearing race started in our swing arm. Now we can commence to whooping the shit out of it and getting it to where it's supposed to go. Some of y'all may notice my homemade bearing driver here. I took the old sprocket shaft extension out of this motor since we're putting a new compensator in it anyway. Now if you notice, see the discoloration on there? I had to cook that sucker and get her nice and cherry red because this is hardened steel. But after I softened it a little bit from cooking it, I put it in the lathe, cut it down, made myself a nifty little bearing driver out of it. And there we go, kids. I got our bearing races in there. Now, heads up, gang. This is where things get a little bit weird, and it kind of goes against common logic, okay? The swing arm bearings in a Shovelhead, they don't have a center tube in between the two bearings that sets the in play of the bearing, kind of like on a wheel bearing, on a tapered wheel bearing. Those bearings are basically left to float free of their own devices, and how they control the in play is these two ears here on the swing arm where the pivot bolt goes through. As you tighten that pivot bolt, it physically bows the ears of the swing arm, or of the frame rather, in on the swing arm, and that's how in play is controlled. This is what I was talking about here and here, okay? These ears physically get squashed together when you torque down the swing arm pivot bolt in the frame. Now this is what I'm talking about right here. This is the original swing arm pivot bolt out of this bike whenever I got it. Now the factory doesn't chrome these. Obviously this thing's been replaced once upon a time, but take note right here. I know it's kind of hard to see there, but you see that little line in the chrome? If you drag your fingernail on it, you can actually feel just the slightest little bit of a lip there. Now this threaded end, this is over on the drive side. That's where the chain is and everything. And what this is from, this was ran slightly loose, and as the bike was being ridden, that swing arm was actually cocking back and forth slightly, ever so slightly, but that bearing was walking around on this swing arm pivot bolt, and it wore a slight step in it. Now, is it enough to warrant replacing the swing arm pivot bolt? Nah, This ain't a big deal. That's barely a scratch in the chrome. But before we grease everything up and we put everything together for keepsies, we're going to mock this up with our bearings and our spacers without the seals in there. That way we can see just how much we're going to have to tighten this bolt and get an idea of how tight it's got to be to where we get our end place set correctly. That way the bearings aren't too loose and are not too tight. Now before we do any of that, we're going to take our swing arm pivot bolt here. We're going to put just a tiny little dab of grease on the threads there, just enough to give it a little slickum, like that much. Like that much right there. Doesn't take a giant blob, y'all. And then we're going to pass that little guy through there, and we're going to make sure that it will thread in without binding or trying to gall, because we've got chrome on these threads here. Remember, chrome adds dimensional thickness to whatever threads are already existing there, so it makes them fatter. If we need to take the wire wheel to the chrome on the threads and knock it down a little bit, or run a thread chaser down it, now's the time to find out if you need to do that. All right, now that we got our threads cleaned out and we know that our swing arm pivot bolt's going to thread all the way through without any major binding or hang-ups or anything like that, let's dry fit this thing and see just how much we're going to have to hoss down on that thing to get the right amount of preload on our bearings. Now doing this is a little fiddly because you're juggling two bearings, two spacers, a swing arm, and a swing arm pivot bolt all at the same time. It's kind of like putting a diaper on an octopus. Come on, go in there. Go in your hole, little buddy. You can do it. Channel your inner Gilmore. Nope, there's half of it. There we go. We only had to give it a minimal amount of tactical bonkage. I do not understand why this thing is being so reluctant to go back to whence it first came. Maybe? Yes, finally. Don't be surprised if you run into stuff like this, guys. I mean, there's a certain amount of tolerance that's involved in all of these parts that are reproductions for a bike like this. And even these bikes, when they were being assembled new on the assembly line, there was a certain amount of manufacturing tolerance that guys on the line had to deal with on the fly. Think about it. We're talking about something from the AMF era here. So, yeah, the quality control standards were a little on the lax side back then. Okay, check it out. Remember when I was talking about setting the bearing preload on our swing arm? That's where this comes into play. Now keep in mind, these bearings are dry except for a very light coating of preservative oil on there. So right now, this is about the freest this thing's ever going to move. Sorry. Slight issue I had to deal with there in today's side note of frustration, if you will. Everybody hates crank calls. Everybody hates scam calls. I get my fair share of them, but nothing like I've gotten in the last week here, okay? It's been undamn real. Like literally since 7 o'clock this morning, my phone has exploded on average about every 10 to 15 minutes with some scammer trying to sell me life insurance or burial insurance or whatever. I know everybody's got to make a living, but you know what? That shit right there will aggravate the hell out of you. And anybody out there that's listening to this, I hope the fleas from 1,000 camels infest your armpits and your groin area. And when they do, I hope you're in a public place where you're absolutely terrified to scratch. Serves you right. Now, gang, I know this is a little bit shorter video than what I typically do, and for that, I apologize. I know there's some people in the audience thinking, thank God that long-winded bastard finally slowed his roll. Well, I had a doctor's appointment this morning, and, you know, hey, nothing bad, you know, no big deal, nothing like that. You know, I don't have a parasitic growth inside of me or anything like that. I just, you know, when you're on the backside of 40, coming up on the big 50, there's things you got to do. And, yeah, it was the thing I had to do. We are all systems go. We are 5 by 5 here. Nothing to worry about, y'all. Clean bill of health. Doctor told me so. I think the term used was God's own prototype or something like that. I don't know. Maybe the wife unit can remind me about that one. Anyway, gang, now that we got our frame back, that way we can start building out the roller on the shovel. Things are going to start happening pretty quick here, all right? There's a lot of stuff that's going to be going on here to where I can make progress moving forward on the bike and not just what you see me doing on camera here, okay? A lot of this stuff it's probably not going to make YouTube's. But there is quite a bit of this stuff that's going to be over on the Patreon side. It's that little tab down there in the description on this video down below. Click it. You'll figure out what we're all about there. Remember, doesn't cost you a single damn red penny to join the Patreon, but that is how you gain access to the JTMJ Discord, and that's where we're building our knowledge library. That's where we're building our brain trust for all the smarticles people to come together and problem solve and spitball ideas and come up with solutions and plan for world dominance and shit. Sorry, sugar rush. I've had one too many candy bars today. Anyway, like I was saying, guys, if you want to see more of the Shovelhead stuff from the behind-the-scenes aspect of it, go check us out on the Patreon. I'm going to be giving regular updates down there. Plus, you guys can get in on the Discord on that. We do trivia every Sunday night. Also, you know, it's just a cool-ass bunch of people that we got over there. A lot of the folks over there on the Patreon and a lot of the folks over there on the Discord, they're the OGs that have been watching this channel since its inception 1 year ago today. You know, I never really thought about that, but I looked the date up, and yeah, legit, it was 1 year ago today. I'm pretty damn proud of that. I'm proud of what we've been able to create here as a community, and I'm proud of the mission that we've been able to help spread to people and everything to let people know, hey, you can do this. You can fix stuff on your own. You're not at the mercy of some dealer that may or may not know how to fix your bike properly because, number one, it may be an older model, and number two, they may not even want to bother with it entirely because they don't know how to fix it. That's a widespread problem within the industry right now, is because you got a lot of old heads that are aging out of the industry. And unfortunately, that knowledge is going away with them. And that right there is the criminal part, because knowledge unshared, that's knowledge lost. That's why we're here. That's why we have the Patreon. That's why we have the Discord. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if you can help somebody just by taking 2 minutes out of your day to relay a little info bit of information that you've got locked up in your head that they may not be aware of, that's what it's all about. That's why we're here. That right there is what makes the difference. That is what creates this community and makes it such a helpful and such a versatile and diverse group of individuals that come together because of a common focal point. We like bike. What can we say? Doesn't matter whether it makes potatoes or makes rice. Doesn't matter whether it's got 1 cylinder or 6, or anything in between for that matter. If it's got 2 wheels, that's good enough for us. Anyway, guys, like I said, got to be a quickie today. I'm going to wrap this up. Make sure you hang around at the end of the premiere because we're going over to the Rainy Rider channel and we're going to hang out and pester him on his premiere on his new video coming out. My aquatic amigo has got something going on about commercials. I think he's modeling for, like sexy man hammock underwear or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but it ought to be a hell of a good watch, okay? And then right after Rainy's video comes out, we're all going to troop over to Gma Rides channel and check her new video out because it's coming out tonight right after Rainy's wraps up. So we got a triple shot for you guys tonight, okay? Get comfy, get a juice box, embrace the weird. Here we are, y'all. Just remember, gang, till next time, I love you. I'll catch y'all on that flip side because we're 1 year down, baby, and we ain't stopping any damn time soon. Hell yeah.
Force will be with you, always.